Good morning. I want to talk to you today about how we can better define Scotland's role in RegTech. So we know that Glasgow and Scotland are major players in the middle and the back office, and in that respect can potentially gain more jobs through becoming a unique centre of expertise and excellence in RegTech. But let's take one step back. The last crisis, 2008, exposed significant failures in regulation and supervision. So financial law and compliance are now very much on the agenda. There is more financial regulation coming this year than at any time in history. Obviously, at the same time, we have our financial markets being tested and stressed in ways that they've never been tested and stressed before. Fortunately, technology is there to help us in this. The innovation that is coming with RegTech and financial technology, Fintech, creates potential gains for not just the regulators, but also the consumers. Now, this innovation will lead to supervisory gains for organizations like the FCA, as well as other prudential supervisory authorities. But it will also lead to reputational gains for the financial services industry. That industry has to regain its trust, and properly instigated RegTech can do that. So why is good oversight important? Well, the actual cost in terms of fines to global banks of misconduct is so far accumulated at $320 billion since the credit crisis. That's an awful lot of money and could have obviously been deployed much better in the economy. Compliance is a substantial cost centre as well. We're talking about 3 to 5% of costs of financial institutions. And if you can automate that and make it more accurate with better outcomes, why wouldn't you want to do that? So optimizing client outcomes is important. Knowing your client is a very key part of what we try to achieve in regulatory outcomes. And if technology can know the client better than someone who only very rarely looks at a file, then why not? Oversight and analysis go hand in hand, and both of them can be automated. So really what we're talking about here is digitalization and also this move to real-time reporting. So most of the discussion in the press and likewise has been on digitalization and manual reporting. And in that respect, the compliance process is very cumbersome, still requiring things like utility documents for proof of your identity. But there's a lot more that can be done in terms of knowing your customer through data mining and such like, and open banking obviously opens up a whole range of potential outcomes there. We talked about the cost savings, but obviously this is also cost saving for the regulator if effectively, as we move to real-time reporting, the process of filing each month or each quarter or each year information that is only then analysed in historical context is obviously immense. So in terms of how do we go about doing this, how do we go about making the whole industry more efficient? Well, essentially we have to work on a number of aspects as to data, being able to get that data, classify that data, and process that data. All things that universities do very well. So that brings me on to what Strathclyde can bring to the table. So it's the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has actually said that Fintech is an ambition of hers. She wants to be a leader in this. And in that respect, she is co-chair of the Fintech Steering Committee. So financial technology is moving very rapidly. And in that respect, RegTech is only catching up with some of the developments that we've seen in the digitalization of payment platforms, for example. But what we have got here in the UK is a very proactive regulator, a regulator that has introduced what is called a sandbox, whereby new concepts, new fintech concepts can be tested and experimented with under controlled conditions with oversight of the regulator. Now we'll come back to that because we can do that here in Scotland, although obviously with university oversight rather than regulatory oversight. So lawmakers and compliance personnel are going to have to change their entire skill set. Why? Because big data requires programming, it requires data analytics, it requires different tools, software tools, to be able to get the most from it. Now, artificial intelligence is at the core of this. This is the ability of computer programs to adapt and evolve with human input through the process of machine learning. But what that can do in terms of bringing that skill set to make things more efficient is it can make reporting procedures, things like the customer rules, tax reporting, anti-money laundering rules, anti-terrorism rules, make all of that easier. So with a colleague, I produced a paper on artificial intelligence and the evaluation of banking risk. And in that respect, we looked at a whole range of artificial intelligence tools and how they can be applied to banking risk. And we went far further than has been done in prior years to looking at things like machine learning, deep learning, speech recognition, natural language processing, visual recognition, and the like. The important thing is that all of these tools can be applied to the whole gamut of risks in an organization. And AI has the potential, because of what it can do, to mitigate these risks. The application of AI is also can add significant economic value to a banking operation. So in terms of risk oversight, the three core risk areas that can be of benefit are in oversight of credit risk, oversight of market risk, and oversight of operations risk. Now, all of these are areas which I think if Glasgow as a financial services district manages to focus on the International Financial Services District, Glasgow, then we can win more outsourced jobs to Glasgow. And that's why it's important to have a regulation technology centre of excellence here in Glasgow. So at the core of that, what we envisage at Strathclyde University is having a financial data lake. Now, initially, this idea was for academic fintech research because databases don't exist in this new field, and therefore to get publications, one needs to effectively generate new data time series. However, the spin-off from this is that, as I said about the sandbox, we can create the same conditions that the regulator is creating with the sandbox, and we can test financial technology ideas against the data in this data lake. And that is very exciting, would be a first in the UK from an academic perspective. The data would have to be blinded in much the same way that, for example, medical data is blinded with the NHS to be able to get outcomes on and analyze that data, but obviously equally important. So what can you do once you've got this? Well, obviously you can backtest, you can do out-of-sample experiments, forward performance checks and so forth, test new delivery concepts in fintech, and test to see how, for example, interest rate sensitivity is to new products. So the next thing that we can do is, obviously, as a university, not only are we a research organisation, but we are an educational organisation. And in that respect, with the large group of RegTech expertise in Glasgow, we can provide a base for a RegTech qualification for compliance personnel. Obviously, the sort of things that would need to be taught for such a qualification are obviously part of a dialogue that would have to be had with industry, but I would envisage things like broad coverage of the regulatory bodies, the compliance function, obviously financial crime, but also all the IT aspects of the financial industry. So the regulatory framework of data and also how the functional flow works in a company like a bank or an insurance company. Splitting the role of the IT from the front office, middle office and back office, and making sure that the compliance personnel have a full understanding of the holistic nature of a company's operations. Obviously, ethics, integrity and fairness, and that feeds through into governance, risk, management and compliance. So in conclusion, what can Strathclyde bring to the table in RegTech? Well, we can act as an honest broker between financial institutions, the regulators and the RegTech outsourcing industry here in Scotland. We can contribute to important areas of oversight and risk control, and we can develop this data lake that I've talked about with blinded information to test new concepts. At the same time, we can help with the upgrade and upskilling of the existing personnel, thereby making Glasgow an attractive place for financial institutions to outsource to. Thank you very much.